The mop hit the floor with a wet slap, and Marcus' chin froze. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, heavy, deliberate, getting closer. He shouldn't be on the 13th floor. Not at 2 a.m. Not ever. "Who's there?" a voice barked. Marcus grabbed his cleaning cart and shoved it toward the service elevator, his heart hammering against his ribs. 6 months ago, he would have been the one asking that question. 6 months ago, he owned buildings like this. Now he was just trying not to get fired from a job that paid $12 an hour. The elevator doors closed just as a security guard rounded the corner. Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage. Because he'd seen something up there. Something that confirmed everything. But let's back up. Let's go back to the night Marcus Chen lost $2.3 billion. The boardroom had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Marcus remembered standing there, looking at the lights below, thinking he owned the world. His company, Chen Industries, had just closed a deal worth $800 million. At 36 years old, he was unstoppable. "Marcus, we need to talk." His CFO, David Park, walked in with 2 FBI agents behind him. Marcus smiled. "David, what's this about?" "If it's about the Tokyo expansion." "Mr. Chen, you're under investigation for securities fraud and embezzlement." The agent's voice was flat, emotionless. The room tilted. "What? That's insane." "David, tell them." David wouldn't meet his eyes. "I'm sorry, Marcus. The evidence is overwhelming." "Evidence? What evidence?" They showed him. Offshore accounts in his name. Falsified documents with his signature. Email chains he'd never written. Someone had built an entire digital trail pointing straight to him. And that someone was sitting 3 feet away, refusing to look at him. "David," Marcus whispered. "It was you." David finally looked up. There was nothing in his eyes. No guilt. No remorse. Just cold calculation. "You were always too trusting, Marcus. That's why I knew this would work." The FBI froze his assets that night. Every account. Every property. Every investment. By morning, his face was on every news channel with the word fraud underneath it. His fiancée left a note on the kitchen counter, "I can't do this." His parents wouldn't return his calls. Friends disappeared like smoke. 2 weeks later, Marcus was living in his car. The only vehicle the feds hadn't seized because it was technically a rental. He parked behind a grocery store and tried to figure out how everything had fallen apart so fast. He needed a job. Any job. But nobody would hire him. His face was too recognizable. His name too toxic. He walked into a staffing agency using his middle name, Mark. Lost 40 pounds. Grew a beard. Stopped caring what he looked like. "We got a janitorial position," the woman at the agency said, barely looking at him. "Overnight shift. Corporate building downtown. You'll be cleaning offices, bathrooms, that kind of thing." Mark, took it. The building was called Meridian Tower. 40 stories of glass and steel housing a dozen different companies. Marcus reported to Rita, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and no patience for excuses. "You'll be assigned to floors 8 through 15, Rita said on his first night. "You clean offices, empty trash, vacuum, clean bathrooms. You don't touch anything on people's desks. You don't read anything. You're invisible. Understand?" Marcus nodded. Invisible. That's exactly what he'd been trying to become. "One more thing," Rita added. "The 13th floor is restricted. You need special clearance to clean up there. Don't even think about it." The first week was humiliating. Marcus scrubbed toilets that executives didn't bother to flush. He emptied trash cans full of half-eaten lunches that cost more than his daily wage. He watched people walk past him like he didn't exist. But he also watched. And he listened. On his second week, a woman stopped him in the hallway. She was holding a vacuum cord he'd left stretched across the floor. "Hey, you'll trip someone with this," she said, smiling. She was maybe 40, with kind eyes and gray streaks in her black hair. Her name tag said Elena. "Sorry," Marcus muttered. "You're new, right?" "I'm Elena. I work the same floors. If you need anything, just ask." Something about her voice tugged at Marcus's memory, but he couldn't place it. He thanked her and moved on. A few days later, Elena found him sitting in a stairwell during his break, staring at nothing. "Rough night?" she asked. Marcus shrugged. "They're all rough." Elena sat down next to him and pulled out 2 sandwiches. She handed him one. "You look like you haven't eaten today." "I'm fine. Take it. I always pack too much anyway." Marcus took the sandwich. It was turkey and Swiss on wheat bread. Simple. Perfect. He hadn't realized how hungry he was until he started eating. "You know," Elena said, "this job isn't so bad once you get used to it. The pay is terrible and the hours are worse, but at least nobody bothers us. We're invisible." That's what Rita said. Rita's good people. Tough but fair. Elena paused. "Can I give you some advice? Don't go to the 13th floor after hours. I know Rita told you it's restricted, but I'm telling you, just don't." "Why not?" Elena's expression darkened. "Because people who ask too many questions about the 13th floor don't work here very long. And I mean that literally." Before Marcus could respond, Elena stood up. "Break's over. See you around, Mark." Marcus started paying attention to the 13th floor. Not obviously. But he noticed things. Security guards stationed at the elevator bank after 10 p.m. Executives in expensive suits coming and going at odd hours. And once, just once, he saw David Park walk out of the elevator. His former CFO. The man who destroyed his life. Walking around free while Marcus scrubbed floors. Marcus felt something ignite in his chest. It wasn't just anger. It was purpose. He started staying late after his shift, memorizing security patterns. He learned which cameras had blind spots, which doors didn't lock properly. He befriended the other janitors and learned the building's secrets, the service corridors, the maintenance shafts, the places nobody paid attention to. And then one night, 3 weeks into the job, Marcus made his move. He waited until 2 a.m. when the building was nearly empty. He took the service elevator to the 12th floor, then climbed the maintenance shaft to 13. His hands were sweating as he emerged into a dimly lit corridor. The offices on the 13th floor were different. Nicer. More expensive. Marcus moved quietly, checking doors until he found one unlocked. Inside was a corner office with a view of the city. The nameplate on the desk said David Park, Chief Investment Officer. Marcus wanted to destroy everything in that room. Instead, he started looking through papers on the desk. Most were boring financial documents. But then he found something interesting, a folder marked Chen Acquisition. His company. Or what used to be his company. Marcus photographed every page with his phone. As he read, the full picture emerged. David hadn't just framed him. David had orchestrated the entire thing to tank Shinteca's stock value, then bought the company through a shell corporation for pennies on the dollar. And he'd done it with help from executives right here in Meridian Tower. That's when Marcus heard the footsteps. He barely made it back to the service elevator before security spotted him. Now, riding down to the basement, Marcus realized something. He wasn't just a victim anymore. He was a threat. And he had proof. The next night, Elena was waiting for him in the supply room. "I know what you did," she said quietly. Marcus's stomach dropped. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. I saw you coming out of the maintenance shaft. You went to 13. Elena closed the door behind her. "And I know who you really are, Marcus Chen." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. How? Because I worked for Chen, Elena said. 4 years ago. I was a financial analyst. I discovered that David Park was embezzling money through fake vendor accounts. I reported it to the board. 2 weeks later, I was fired. My reputation was destroyed. Nobody would hire me. Sound familiar? Marcus stared at her. You tried to stop him? I tried. Nobody listened. They said I was making it up to cover my own mistakes. Elena's voice was bitter. David is very good at what he does. He's been running the same scheme for years, at different companies. He finds successful CEOs, gets close to them, bleeds the company dry, then frames them for it. You're just his latest victim. Why are you telling me this? Because I've been waiting for someone like you. Someone with the knowledge and the motivation to help me take him down. Elena pulled out a folder. I've been gathering evidence for 3 years, working here, collecting documents, recording conversations. But I can't do this alone. The conspiracy goes deeper than David. It involves people all over this building. People with power and money and connections. Marcus looked at the folder. Then at Elena. What are you proposing? There's a board meeting happening on the 13th floor in 3 days. Every executive involved in David's schemes will be there. If we can get solid evidence, recordings, documents, everything, we can expose all of them at once. Elena met his eyes. But it's risky. If we get caught, we'll both end up in prison. Or worse. Marcus thought about the past 6 months. The humiliation. The betrayal. The nights in his car wondering if it was worth continuing. Then he thought about David Park walking free while Marcus's life burned to ashes. I'm in, Marcus said. Over the next 3 days, Marcus and Elena recruited carefully. They brought in Carlos, a janitor who'd been a corporate lawyer until a wrongful conviction destroyed his career. They brought in Dimitri, an immigrant who'd lost his tech company to a hostile takeover. They brought in Sarah, a college student working her way through school who was brilliant with computers. Each person had been chewed up and spit out by the same system that protected people like David Park. And each person was ready to fight back. Rita, their supervisor, found them planning in the basement on the second night. I knew something was going on, Rita said. Marcus tensed, ready to run. But Rita pulled out a badge. FBI. I've been investigating Meridian Holdings for 2 years. Every time we get close, evidence disappears. Witnesses change their stories. But if you're really going after David Park and his network, I can help. Unofficially. Marcus couldn't believe it. Your FBI? Was. Retired last year but kept this job because I knew something dirty was happening here. I just couldn't prove it. Rita looked at each of them. What you're planning is dangerous and probably illegal. But if you pull it off, you'll expose one of the biggest corporate fraud rings on the East Coast. I can make sure the right people see your evidence. But you have to get it first. The night of the board meeting, Marcus stood in the basement with his team, wearing his janitor uniform. His hands weren't shaking anymore. He felt calm. Focused. This was it. Everyone knows their role? Elena asked. They nodded. Carlos would monitor security feeds from a maintenance closet. Sarah would hack into the building's network to record everything happening in the 13th floor conference room. Dimitri would create a distraction if needed. Elena and Marcus would plant recording devices and retrieve the physical evidence. Let's do this, Marcus said. They moved through the building like ghosts. Years of being invisible had taught them every blind spot, every service corridor, every camera angle. They reached the 13th floor just as the meeting was starting. Marcus could hear voices through the conference room door. David's voice. Others he didn't recognize. They were discussing expansion plans. New targets. New victims. Elena planted the first recording device under the conference table while Marcus photographed documents left on a side table. Everything was going perfectly. Then the door opened. David Park stood there, staring at Marcus. For a moment, nobody moved. Then recognition flashed across David's face. "Marcus?" David's voice was barely a whisper. "You're alive?" Marcus met his former friend's eyes. Surprise. David's shock turned to rage. He grabbed for his phone, but Elena was faster. She knocked it out of his hand, and it shattered on the marble floor. "Call for help, and this goes public right now," Elena said, holding up her phone. "We're streaming everything to a dozen different news outlets. Every word you've said tonight. Every document in this room. It's over, David." David looked between them, calculating. Other executives started emerging from the conference room, confused and angry. Marcus recognized some of them, people he'd once considered colleagues. "You have no idea what you're doing," David said coldly. "You're nothing. A failed CEO and a washed-up analyst playing detective. Nobody will believe you." "Maybe," Marcus said. "But they'll believe Rita." Rita stepped out from the service corridor, badge in hand. Not her old FBI badge, her new one. "David Park, you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. And that's just the beginning." The next hour was chaos. FBI agents flooded the building. Executives tried to run and were caught. David was led away in handcuffs, screaming about lawyers and lawsuits. Marcus watched it all from the sidelines, still in his janitor uniform, feeling surreal. Elena found him sitting on the floor outside the conference room. "We did it," she said quietly. "Yeah," Marcus replied. "We did. What now?" Marcus thought about that. 6 months ago, he would have wanted everything back, the company, the money, the respect. Now he looked at Elena, at Carlos and Dimitri and Sarah celebrating down the hall, at Rita coordinating with federal agents. "I think," Marcus said slowly, "I want to build something different. Something better." 3 months later, Marcus stood in a small office that used to be a warehouse. It wasn't fancy, but it was his. The sign on the door said Second Chance Consulting. Elena walked in carrying coffee. "We got another client. Woman who lost her business to a predatory loan scheme. She heard about us and wants to fight back." Marcus smiled. "Tell her we'll help." The company they'd built wasn't about making billions. It was about helping people who'd been knocked down by a system designed to protect the powerful. They investigated fraud. They gathered evidence. They gave people their lives back. Carlos was their legal expert. Dimitri handled tech security. Sarah managed operations while finishing her degree. Rita consulted when she wasn't busy with FBI cases. And Elena was his partner in every sense of the word. Marcus's name had been cleared. Chen had been dissolved, its assets used to compensate victims of David's schemes. Marcus had recovered some of his wealth, enough to fund this new venture and live comfortably. But he'd learned something important in those months as a janitor: money didn't make him valuable. Purpose did. One evening, Marcus was leaving the office when he passed a janitor emptying trash cans in the lobby. He stopped and smiled. "Thank you for keeping this place clean," Marcus said. "I appreciate what you do." The janitor looked surprised, then smiled back. "Thanks, man. Most people don't notice us." "I notice," Marcus said. Walking to his car, a modest sedan, nothing fancy, Marcus thought about how far he'd fallen and how far he'd climbed back up. Not to the same place. To somewhere better. His phone buzzed. A text from Elena: "Dinner at my place? I'm cooking." Marcus smiled and replied, "Be there in 20. As he drove through the city, Marcus realized something. He'd spent years building an empire without ever seeing the people who made it possible. The janitors. The security guards. The assistants. The invisible army that kept everything running while people like him took credit. Now he saw them. And more importantly, he was one of them. 6 months as a janitor had taught Marcus more about humanity, perseverance, and justice than 10 years as a billionaire ever did. He'd lost everything and found something more valuable: purpose, connection, and the knowledge that real power came from helping others, not stepping on them. The story of Chen wasn't just about a fall from grace or even redemption. It was about transformation. About learning that sometimes you have to lose everything to see what really matters. And what mattered wasn't the billions or the empire or the recognition. It was the people you helped. The connections you made. The difference you left behind. Marcus parked outside Elena's apartment building and looked up at the lights in the windows. Somewhere up there was someone he cared about, someone who'd seen him at his worst and helped him become his best. He locked his car and headed inside, leaving behind the billionaire he used to be and embracing the person he'd become. Someone who knew the value of hard work. Someone who respected everyone, regardless of their position. Someone who understood that the janitor mopping floors at 2 a.m. might be the bravest person in the building. Someone who'd learned that the untold story of unexpected connections wasn't about how he fell. It was about who he became when he got back up. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about the invisible people in your own life, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss these stories. Drop a comment telling me about a time someone overlooked helped you. And smash that like button if you believe everyone deserves a second chance. Because stories like Marcus's remind us that our circumstances don't define us, our choices do. See you in the next one.